We acknowledge the lands of the traditional custodians across Australia. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples' continuing connection to land, water and sky country. We acknowledge the wine regions and hundreds of different nations around this continent, and the ancient soils on which we stand and grow. From the Wadani salt bush peoples of Margaret River in our west, to the East Coast Sunrise people of the Yuin Nation, and the Southern Island and salt bush peoples of the Nione peoples of Tasmania. Today and always, we pay our deep respects to the custodians, those who went before and those who will follow, as the knowledge holders of tomorrow. This is Australia.
Hello, and welcome to all joining us today to learn more about the opportunities for Australian wine in China. My name is Paul Torali from Wine Australia, and I'd also like to acknowledge the Kaurna people whose land I'm speaking to you from today, and pay my respects to their leaders past, present and emerging. Over the next 90 minutes, you'll hear from a range of experts around the opportunities in China. And the headline numbers look extremely impressive, with over 1 billion in exports shipped in the past 12 months. But it is important to keep an eye on what's happening on the ground. Are stocks pulling through? Are all exporters achieving similar results? What are the implications of current global tariffs? And what does that mean for all of us as we continue to navigate this uncertainty? Understanding the evolving market landscape and emerging sales channels will be important to capitalise on the opportunities that present in China. Our panel today comprises Lauren Gilbert, Consul and Trade and Investment Commissioner with Austrade, who is based in Guangzhou, Eric Yu from United Media Solutions to talk us through the evolving digital and social media landscape in China, Bree Wood, APAC Communications Manager, Wine Australia, on upcoming market activities, and Dr. Naomi Verdonk, Wine Australia's Market Access Manager, to provide a market access and regulatory update. Before I hand over to Lauren, a few quick facts. In the year ended March 2025, China has reclaimed its position as Australia's #1 export market by value. In fact, the value in China is eclipsing the UK, the US and Canada value combined. The average value of packaged wine shipped to mainland China was $23 per litre, much higher than any other major export market. And volume is now number 3 behind the UK and the USA. The numbers are staggering, and we continue to invest behind in-market activities geared toward building awareness, understanding and preference for Australian wine. That said, we all need to be aware that keeping a focus on market diversification is paramount. You're welcome to add questions to the group chat, and the team will do their best to answer in the Q&A session scheduled after their presentations. Please also be aware that today's presentation is being recorded, and a link will be provided to all those registered after the webinar. So to start us off and tell us more about the opportunity, I'd now like to introduce Lauren from Austrade to provide a market overview and some insights on what's happening on the ground in China. Lauren, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Lauren, are you there, darling?
Yeah, I am. Can you hear me?
I can now. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I've had some technical issues again. So my name is Lauren Gilbert. I'm the Trade and Investment Commissioner here based in Guangzhou and looking after the wine sector for mainland China, Hong Kong and Taiwan. So today I'll be speaking for about 25 minutes on the business environment, Australian wine in China, what we're seeing here on the ground, sales channels, and I'll be speaking more about this in the second session where I'll be talking about e-commerce, and then finally some success tips for you today in terms of 2025 here in May. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. So in terms of the operating context for Australian businesses in both China and globally is incredibly complex. China is our largest trading partner and will remain so for the foreseeable future. And I want to address up ahead, the US tariffs are having varying effects, and we're experiencing more inquiries for Australian wine, but we're also yet to see what the effects are going to be for, say, European wines that might be redirecting their wines from the US to China. And for the Australian government, we continue to promote the benefits of free trade. Now, we're still seeing opportunities, especially resulting from the trends here and factors in China, including a middle class that continues to grow. Around 20% of the world's middle class live in China, and BCG actually estimates that by 2030, China's middle class and affluent population will make up around 40% of the population. Now, what does that mean for wine? Well, wine consumers, they're much more sophisticated. They're looking at new trends like white, lighter reds. They're also spending on travel and experiences such as, and also spending on things like educations. So brands should really be thinking about how they factor this into their strategy. But the economy has slowed, and so consumer confidence, we're seeing people are saving a lot more, but they are looking for really good deals, and that includes for premium products. And so through this trend, we've seen membership stores like Sam's Club that offer premium products at a good value price becoming really popular here in China. Now, demand for food security, this is not only at a national level, but also at an individual level. And that might be around making sure, for national level, making sure that they've got supply and access to food, but also individually in terms of food safety. And imported products tend to be seen as safe options. An ageing population, lower fertility rates of about 1, whereas the replacement rate needs to be 2.1, and an average population is now 38.8. So that's higher, say, for example, than that of the US, which is 38. But that said, again, people are still, they're spending on themselves, they're spending on their pets, say the younger generation, older generation, I often see out in Guangzhou, taking photos, dressed to the nine, popping over to have a coffee or a wine in the afternoon to enjoy with their friends. And now healthy lifestyles. This is not just in China, but also around the world. COVID really has had a substantial impact. We're seeing increased demand for things like supplements, sports. For wine, it means lower alcohol wine, also choosing to drink less. And everything is online. I've counted, on average, I buy about 3 or 4 things online here in China each day. It is very much the way of life. And of course, I'm going to be speaking more about that in a moment in the e-commerce session. Next slide, please. Now, the consumer landscape, we're looking at a population of 1.4 billion, of which around 1 billion of them are living in urban regions. And now, although we are seeing lower tier cities having a surgency, so that's a really interesting area to watch, particularly of the white collar who've been working in first higher tier cities, choosing to go back to their original homes to set up businesses, have a slower life, and bring a lot of the trends that are popular, say in Shenzhen, Shanghai, to those lower tier cities. The workforce as a share of population, as the elderly rises, ageing population, there is a real need for improved quality of the labour force through better education, which is essential to boosting productivity, as well as investment in technologies. So drone deliveries, we're seeing them more prevalent, automation and driverless vehicles. And then finally around the internet users and the e-commerce. And again, I'm going to address that in my later presentation. Next slide. Now, Australian wine in China. Well, before I get started, the headline numbers, they look extremely impressive. We're looking at around $1 billion in exports shipped to mainland China in the past year. But we have been keeping an eye on what's been happening here in the ground. So monitoring, for example, whether stocks are being pulled through, the general sentiment towards Australian wine, and generally importers are confident in Australian wine compared to other regions. And that confidence has grown again more recently. Now, importers have the confidence to move stock, but it's generally much more slow. So what does that mean for exporters? So it's really important to understand the evolving market landscape and emerging sales channels. You need to be flexible and adaptable to these current dynamics, including e-commerce, including leveraging digital channels, hence why we're covering it in the webinar. Next slide. Now, Australian wines have returned to the top in terms of value and second by volume within just 10 months' time. So this data or graph here is in relation to the China imports. So this stimulated imports overall by around 37% in value and 14% in volume in 2024, and with around a third of it coming from Australia. The wine price, Australia ranks number one at around 25 Australian dollars. In comparison, French, US are around $23 a litre. Therefore, Australian wines, they are in the leading position in premium wines in the market. The US was number 5 largest wine exporter by value and 6 by volume to China, though their share is less than 5%. So we are watching the developments here, obviously, with what's happening with the US tariffs. Next slide, thanks. Now, for the first quarter, Australian wine took 46% of total import wine share. This is for the first quarter of 2025. We can see that sparkling wines here are increasing in popularity. The premium quality bottled wine is increasing demand, but also quality bulk wines, so say plus 10 litres, are becoming more appealing to Chinese consumers. Next slide. Now, China, as we know, is the largest export market for Australian wine, but what do these numbers translate to what we're seeing here on the ground? So although red wine is making up the majority, we are seeing a growing interest in white wine. And I mentioned earlier around the growing interest in sparkling wine. And so there have been a number of reported orders that we've heard of, and we've been responding to this trend by running programs focused on, say, sparkling wine, white wine, such as in Sparkling Australia in Shenzhen last August. Premium wines are also entering with around 10.65 FOB on average, much higher than other markets for Australian wine. And what we're seeing are well-known brands on the shelves, smaller boutique and premium wines, and are finding that target consumers are really enjoying these premium wines through exclusivity. And now, while value from the past before duties is similar, the biggest difference was the total volume shift. Volume exports were about 44% below 2018 levels. And the consumption on wine is around a third of what it was at the peak in 2019. But again, although people are watching their wallets and drinking less, they're increasingly, when they do drink, they're choosing to drink well and they want value for money. Next slide. So we're about a year on since the Australian wines returned to the market, and for those who haven't been here recently, so I'm giving this update on most recent in terms of what we're seeing. The China economic slowdown, it has weakened consumer confidence. This has led to a decline in wine consumption and a reduction in China's wine imports compared to pre-pandemic levels. Now, while the return of Australian wines in 2024 has driven a temporary rebound for imports, 2025 may see renewed pressure due to these economic headwinds and restocking having already been done. People are cautious about their spending. They're spending less extravagantly at business banquets and company giving. Demand has certainly fallen. And they're also leading more healthy lifestyles. So tending not to gift wine, maybe gifting nuts and beautiful fruits in comparison. So they're also following a restocking in early 2024. Chinese importers are now prioritising inventory clearance. So new orders and product launches are facing delays, we've heard, and these replenishment cycles are extended at least by 2 to 3 months. So focus remains definitely on selling existing stock rather than expanding their portfolios. Now, consumers seek value for money premium wines to replace these overheated brands. So we're seeing mid to low tier wines. They're facing a lot of scrutiny with buyers comparing prices across multiple channels before making their purchases. And as well, OEM wine importers are getting more critical on the quality wines for money. There is an emerging interest in story-driven boutique labels. So think family-owned wineries with heritage. This is particularly so within the mid-tier sector segment. And then finally, collaborating closely with importers on localised campaigns. And this could be around consumer tastings, digital campaigns, the end users going to events like masterclasses and VIP visits. This has become really important for brands to connect directly with consumers. Next slide. So opportunities do still exist. The Australian wine is in a very interesting position. And if you think back to where we were just a year ago and where we are now, certainly the landscape has changed significantly. So what we're hearing is after a year's wait and see, many European wine importers have started their brand wine selection. It's really hard for them to miss out on this opportunity, and they're seeing it as a way to diversify their portfolio. So just yesterday, I was at Wine to Asia in Shenzhen speaking to some wine distributors, European wine distributors, and they were telling me that they were planning to expand their portfolio to include Australian wine for the first time. I mentioned earlier around stories, but we're also seeing packaging is a really great way to differentiate and attract consumers. They really want to try something new. This is a trend not just in wine, but across multiple areas, particularly with the younger generation wanting to try and experience new trends. So what this might translate into, we're seeing small, well-designed bottles. For example, I saw them in Shenzhen that are different, interesting, and really good to share on social media. The first-tier cities are experiencing great living pressure, so driving this consumption to second and third-tier cities, even to fourth-tier cities. And for example, I went to Dunhuang in Gansu, which is northwest China, a couple of months ago. It was really interesting to speak with a coffee and wine store owner who had previously lived in Shanghai. They'd come back to their hometown because they saw more opportunities there and again, a more relaxing lifestyle. But again, people in Dunhuang and also the tourists going and visiting there are wanting to have these similar experiences that they were experiencing in first-tier cities. Fine dining and also wine consumption opportunities are growing in these lower tier cities, but again, requiring value for money and menu pairing. We're seeing a surge in trendy bars, wine-focused bistros, experiential retail spaces. This is creating new on-premise opportunities for consumption, but again, it needs to be affordable and good quality for this younger generation. Experiences, we're seeing urban escape trends, camping, rooftop markets, pop-ups, and this is also driving demand for portable formats, so smaller cans or smaller bottled wine, which is perfect for summer. So do factor that into your strategy, given that it's getting very, very hot here. So we're coming up to summer and more people would be demanding those types of wines. We're seeing different flavours, such as limoncello style, for example. I saw in Shenzhen yesterday a limoncello wine. It had a lot of people standing at the booth, as well as wine enthusiasts, especially these are the ones who are demanding premium wines. They want quality, prominence, storytelling over price, and they're looking for these limited edition, lesser known appellations. Next slide. And one more, thank you. So, one more slide, please. Now, although this focuses just on off-trade, for on-trade, as I mentioned earlier, before with bistros and bars, they're certainly becoming more popular, but again, at the affordable level, we're seeing more people do BYO, bring your own, through instant retail, bringing their wines into the restaurant through delivery apps. I'm going to talk more about that in the e-commerce session. And then hotel, restaurants and fine dining, again, looking at value for money. So it really can help to do wine pairing and these value menus. Now, in terms of wine distributors, the top 5 account for around 15%. So it's quite segmented, although we have seen a consolidation since before COVID, with many, unfortunately, going out of business. Retail channels with an off-trade focus, which is the graph that I'm referring to here. I'll talk more about e-commerce later on, but you can see that it's certainly grown. But generally, we're seeing overall a fall in retailers offline. And although specialists are up, so thinking these boutique wine stores, educators, specialty wines that they're looking to expand their range, it's definitely tending to move towards e-commerce as the most popular sales channel. Next slide. So I'm going to light touch on this page because a lot of it is addressed in the next presentation on e-commerce. But a question that we often get is, which platforms should I be on? So one piece of advice or a tip is to check your competitors and what presence do they have on which platforms to help form your strategy. You can also have a look at how they're using those platforms, how frequently that they're using these platforms to really help figure out what the landscape looks like and what works best for your brand. So a couple of the platforms to note just here are Taobao on the right-hand side. It remains number one with around 928 million monthly active users. So pretty much the entire population is using Taobao on a monthly basis. Little Red Book, we've been speaking to some interesting sellers on this platform. Again, younger generation looking for premium and exclusive wines. Now, on live streaming, Douyin is the example here. This has grown substantially in terms of e-commerce over the past couple of years, from 87 billion Australian dollars in 2019, which was about 5% of all e-commerce sales, up to 32% proportion, which was 1 trillion Australian dollars in 2023. So again, I'm going to talk more about that, but I wanted to highlight that as an example. Douyin, in fact, accounts for around 37% of all live streaming e-commerce transactions. Next slide. And the next one. So this is in the context of 2025, some success tips. We have amended these, actually, in fact, based on the last time that I did a presentation around 6 months, maybe even more, 6+ months ago. So this is really the here and now, some of the top tips based on the conversations that we're having with buyers. So the first is, again, knowing your buyer. Importers, they do have confidence in Australian wines. I'm hearing that repeatedly, as is our team, compared to wines from other regions. They have confidence, but they're moving the stock slowly. And so really what this means is it's very important to have a partnership to be successful so you can support each other. There is opportunities rather for new wine deals to be signed, but please make sure that you are maintaining your existing relationships with your existing suppliers. They tend to be, for example, some of the conversations yesterday, the importers or distributors are starting to expand their portfolio, not just in terms of the regions or the countries, but they're also looking at different price points, say much lower than they were in the past or even higher than they were in the past, to really be able to connect with different target consumers. Generally, though, we are hearing they're looking for medium price wines or competitively priced entry wines, but that changes regularly. And again, for example, the bulk wine growth that we've seen just for this first quarter. So it's really just we're continuing to watch and see the developments. And now, while Chinese drinkers rely on Chinese drinkers continue to rely on the people that they trust. So these networks or guanxi still continues to matter. So do factor that in, not just in terms of how you're working with your buyers, but also in how you're engaging with consumers. Now, these drivers of success, really important to moderate your expectations, particularly as the market has slowed. And so in China, the world total wine consumption has fallen, and Australian wine exports to China are still dominated by a few brands. And so the market too, although a large population, still needs education. I heard again yesterday is that it's not like the margins of before. And so it really means you need to have a smart strategy and a planning for the long term. Cultivate the younger generation. So they're seeing wine as a fashionable career. They're looking at channels such as live streaming, private domain, associations. They have this association with modern and Western lifestyles is really connected with drinking wine. And be flexible to the changes. React to requests from your partners and consumers, and that's really going to continue to keep you ahead of the game. Finally, building sales channels and differentiating your products in different channels, and doing this through telling great stories. Next slide. Now, a couple of important things to note. Do make sure, this is whether you're a wine business or whatever, in a different sector, really important for Australian businesses and other businesses to be aware of this. The do's, make sure that you have registered your product and IP, and in China, it's a first to file, so you need to do this as soon as possible. Managing risk with legal advice and a well-devised strategy, ensuring compliance with new regulations, and also the fact that regulations can change quite frequently and with sometimes little warning. So making sure that you're ahead of that. Speaking to your customers in their language, and come and visit China. So, the China, even 6 months ago compared to now, the types of trends that we're seeing has already developed. So it's really important, in fact, not just to come and visit once or a handful of times, but to be doing it ongoing. Now, the don'ts rather, don't take success for granted. Don't stop pursuing market diversification and defending our share in other markets. So we've seen the importance of this the past couple of years with what's happening in here, but also on a global scale, definitely now. So making sure that you're reducing that risk through market diversification. Don't rely on one sales, marketing or consulting channel, and don't lose control, of course, through your brand development. So that really helps in making sure that you diversify your channels and importers, distributors, making sure that you've got a very good view of what's happening with your business in the market. And then finally, don't leave your nous, commercial nous and ethics at the door. Next slide. Now, in terms of Austrade, we have a great team here, which I'll just share in a moment, but also some really easy to access resources. So this is mainly through the Go Global Toolkit, which was launched a couple of months ago by Austrade. We've got a number of updates that come through there, talking more about the market insights of wine and other sectors, even outside of wine and beverages to China, but also a video series that I encourage you to take a look at. We filmed this about even a year ago, but it's still very, very relevant. So please take a look at that, as well as these ongoing blog posts. And the more recent one was about live streaming tips. So again, very relevant to the information that you're going to be hearing today. We also have activities. We're supporting Wine Australia. You're going to be hearing more about their activities later on, as well as promotions that we do here in the market in some of the larger trade shows, such as CRIE. Next slide. Now, finally, I wanted to make sure that you know who our team are here in the market. I will actually be finishing up my posting here in China at the end of June, so it's very soon. I wanted to make sure that you were connected with Martin Ferrer, who will be taking over wine, but also continuing to do his work as the lead for the agribusiness and consumer team for the region. We've got team members across Beijing, Shanghai, Chengdu, Guangzhou, but also Hong Kong and Taiwan, if you're looking at other markets within the region. And of course, Matt Davison in Adelaide is always there to be contacted. So thank you so much for the opportunity to speak, and look forward to coming back to present on e-commerce in a moment. And so from here, I will hand over to Eric to present to us on social media from UMS. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. Again, and also thanks Wine Australia for having us to present today. I think we'll take this opportunity to talk a little bit more about what is China's digital landscaping. I know Lauren in her presentation had already very briefly touched on like WeChat, Red, TikTok, and all other things, and some of the consumer behaviors, which are all very handy. But in our presentation, I think we will be more focusing on the apps, what's the difference, what's the behavior online, and etc. So I will be talking about around 15 minutes. So first of all, myself is Eric Hu, so I'm working as senior partners in UMS. Myself is based in Melbourne and China, so I fly around. So what we do in UMS is we are a digital marketing agency, so we're helping clients to talk to China, to connect with China, and our brands starting like including from MSCGs to healthcare, to governments, to education, to tourism, and all the others, which are very broad selection of clients, actually helping us to know a bit more about Chinese customers, and we know what they are thinking, and we are here actually on ground in China to know a bit more about what they want. And some of the key things we delivered to helping clients from 3 different stages. So first one is about to helping the clients to know a bit more about China, to see if they are suitable for Chinese marketing, including digital transformation consulting to corporate strategic planning. And secondly is we're helping to connecting and educating customers to strengthen brand influence. And lastly, we're also helping to do growth marketing from content strategy to digital solutions as well. So that's the key things we do to how to helping our clients to success in China. But let's talk about China today. So China, as Lauren mentioned, is a 1.4 billion population, and it's actually still growing at the meantime. And we have 1.1 billion online users. But to be noticed here is there are 1.096 billion users, which is like majority of the online users, or we can say all of the online users, they're actually mobile users. And it's a huge populations here, and it's combined populations of Singapore, US, Japan, Vietnam, UK, Italy, Spain, and Germany, and many, many other countries. So it's an incredible market and a huge market for you to explore. But the question here is to understand the consumers here. So first of all, yes, we need to know all of these apps, YouTube, Facebook, Google, Instagram. Now, all the apps we are actually prefer to use in Western markets are banned in China due to regulations. So what is the apps that we should be using here in China? So we have listing, I would say, a digital map for you to know. So from messaging to e-commerce and to all different things, it's a totally different systems here in China. Like, for example, in Western, when we do messaging, we use WhatsApp, we're using messages, we're using iMessage. But in China, we use WeChat, we use QQ. And not many people here are still using messages, like text messages anymore, but mainly online messages. And for e-commerce, we use Taobao, Tmall, JD, PDD, Meituan, and all the others. There are no Amazon or eBay or Walmart available here in China. And more importantly, I think we need to focusing here is on the social networking and the search engine. Because of the ways of how things are working in China from the consumer's perspective, is the apps we're using and the information we are gathering is all mainly on those social networking apps. For example, Red, WeChat, TikTok, which is Douyin, and Weibo. And from search engine perspective, it's about Baidu, Sogou, and 360. So that's the things very, very differently. And we need to aware in the first place is how our contents could be received by the consumers, and where is the platforms we should be go to, where to sell and where to promote. So that's the things I think really important for our Australian One brands to consider here. And in China, so when we know about the app is so different, it's also very important for us to know the digital first cultures here in China. So one thing very interesting here in China is Chinese actually skipped the desktop PCs and went directly to internet access on smartphones. Like, for example, a very interesting example, my grandma, she's 84 years old at the moment. She don't know how to use computers. She probably only know how to turn on and turn off with the actual physical buttons. But she can using really smoothly on her smartphones to watch videos, to buy things, to send red pockets to me, to her other child. So that's really important, is to understand how the contents or how the ways of buying and receiving information is really, really heavily engaged on mobile phones. So everything need to be mobile phone friendly here in China. And also, as mentioned, like mobile payments are very essential in China as well. Like cash is no longer used. Like if you give 100 bills to merchants here in China, nobody will actually take it. And also affordable and fast e-commerce deliveries. Ideally, it should be free in China. is very important. We buy things we really rely on if it can deliver tomorrow or within 2 or 3 days. If anything we need more than like 5 days or 10 days, we probably will consider not to buy that. And also really important is internet search and product research logic is very different to Western markets. There are no Google, obviously, and also like Western markets, we tend to probably do searches. When we see a product, we probably go to Instagram, we go to Amazon product review, we'll probably go to Google, we'll probably go to Reddit to know a bit more about the product. But here in China, we will very focusing on 1 or 2 apps. We go to a social platform like Xiaohongshu, which is Red, or we go to TikTok, Douyin in China to search, and also we go to e-commerce platforms to search what is actually about these products, and we make the decision to buy or not. So that's something we need to be aware in the digital landscapes here in China. So we know more about Chinese consumers or Chinese. We like to spending quite a lot of time on mobile phones, which is typically average 4.5 hours on phone every day. So we also need to be aware about where the time is actually being consumed. So there's about 1 hour in messaging, so mainly like QQ, WeChat, and 1.26 hours average on short videos, which could be on Douyin, could be on Red or other apps as well. And also it's 1.35 hours on other information such as like news, search engines, shoppings, or Red for feed informations. And also it's another 31 minutes on all kinds of integrated informations and 31 minutes on online videos. And just to be noticed here, we talk about online videos here. We usually mention it about it's a longer form of the videos here in China rather than short videos, usually about 1 minute or 2 minutes, but longer videos could be like about 5 minutes. So that's the main times people are actually spending their time on their mobile phones every day. So we know about that. So the key platforms here is also very important. Today, I think I will introduce 3 key platforms for the new market entries to know a bit more. First one is Little Red Box, which is also called Xiaohongshu or Red, and Douyin, which is a sister app of TikTok. I believe everyone know about that, and same as WeChat, I believe everyone know about that as well. So when it comes to user engagements and marketing potentials, so that's the 3 apps we definitely will recommend you to know a bit more and to think about whether you should be on that or not. So firstly, let's know a bit more about Xiaohongshu Red. So that's 312 million monthly active users, which is more than Instagram, Pinterest, or Amazon or any others. One thing need to be focused to know here is that 70% of the users are female and about 30% of the users are male. And the user demographics is mainly 69% of the users are actually in tier 1 and tier 2 cities, which means there's actually a strong buying power for the users in Red. And the majority of the users is from 18 to 34, which combines about 77% of the total users. So within Red, so what's the information like people are expected to receiving there? So here is a screenshot on what it looks like on Red. So you will see a different post, which is a little bit similar to Instagram, but it's much more information shared on that. Like usually on Instagram, it will be a short contents of text, but on Red, it will be a very long, comprehensive reviews. It could be relating to products. It could be relating to their travel vlog or plot. We call it today is photo vlog, photo log. So all of the things, it could be happening on Little Red Box. So some of the key features, like for example, home feed and search, that's the key 2 things we all the users were actually using on Little Red Box. So on the home feed, they can explore all kinds of different things, and thanks to the great algorithm little robot they're having, so they will recommend on anything you might be liking or anything you actually had searched before, and even you probably just mentioned the keywords a couple of times on your phone through the microphone. Little robot sometimes will introduce or recommend some related posts to you, so which is really magical. So yeah, that's a really great app for informations to be delivered to based on your interest, or it's also a very great app to be searched because of this loss of user-generated contents in there. And also one thing I think is worth to mentioning here with Little Robot is influencers, which are also really important on TikTok, which is starting as well. So influencer is a really big thing in China, and we can discuss about that later if you're interested. But think about using your own contents and influencers' content correctly in China will really help to boost your awareness in China. So second app, Douyin, I don't think I need to mention too much on that. I think we all know about how that works. Just some key stats, that's 816 million monthly active users on Douyin, and the majority is under 24. It combines 40% of the users. So 25 to 30, about 23%, 31 to 40, about 30%. And from the user locations, is mainly on tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 cities. And also the things we're expecting on Douyin is receiving information and also to spend the time while we're waiting for trains or we are on travels. So that's the main time people were spending on Douyin. But it's also great opportunities while you integrate your information into Douyin while they are actually wasting their time to go through the apps. So that's something as a marketers, I think really important to be considered. So that's what it looks like on Douyin. I believe most of us had actually seen this before. So that's a similar, very great algorithm, just like Little Robots, who will recommend things you would like to see, and also anything go viral on internet as well. And also, I think what's to mentioning here is Douyin and Red are all integrated with e-commerce functions as well. So if you do the right contents there, that could be it could be lead to sales eventually as well. So WeChat is a super app, we say, in China. So it's 1.37 billion monthly active users. Basically, everyone in China is using WeChat. So we do everything there. We do messaging, so we do sharing, so we do payments, and we do WeChat mini programs. So WeChat mini programs essentially is a mini app, but it's integrated into WeChat. So it's pretty mighty functions. You can achieve anything, loyalty programs, to share information, to call a taxi, or anything could be achieved there. We usually will really recommend our customers, especially the new entries to China, to know WeChat a bit more. Firstly, it's a messaging app for you to connect with your distributors, with your customers, and also it's also could be a kind of like an official website you need to be here in China. So lastly, with the three apps, I won't go too much details on that, but it's the three apps I highly recommend for the audience here today to download the app, to actually try the app today and to experience about that. Even though if you can't read the language, but I know they are also English integrated, you can try to use your translator to put some of the keywords in there, especially on Red, to search on, to feel what kind of the contents will be generated from there. So, and also a few things we found pretty interesting, and we think is worth to sharing here today is regarding on the Chinese consumer insights, which Lauren actually also touched base on as well. Is young consumers, they buy less but better, and 49.5% are willing to pay more for better quality and taste, and they are the highest percentage of the drinkers. They have no no preference on where the wine is actually coming from. So there's great opportunities for Australian ones, no matter you're from South Australia, West Australia, or Victoria or Tasmania or any regions. So there's actually a very good opportunities to stand out as an Australian one or as a regional one. And the female drinkers, they have a higher chance to choose wine rather than like baijiu or any other drinks in China. And like Lauren mentioned, sparkling, low alcohol, white wine wines are getting more and more popular. But really importantly is to be different, and fashionable branding is a better acceptance by young consumers as well. So a quick conclusion. So when you want to get into China, firstly, you need to get strategic and think about the demographics on where is the consumers you want to target. And you need to create engaging and compelling content and build a social metrics to having the right content on the right platforms. And after that, everything's ready to do dynamic advising, social SEOs, and influencer collaborations in the long term as well. And there are definitely some opportunities and barriers. To go a little bit deeper is you definitely want to be China friendly. So from the marketing collaterals, you need to be translated properly, and you want it to be on the right social media platforms. And also consumer behaviors are really important. It should be relevant and the culture resonating as well. And the local entity ready, so you need to have your server, your domain verified in China. It's slightly different to have a website out of China, or either you can just have a social account register and ongoing promotions, and also you want to having future digital integrations as well. And also you want to having a professional service on agency partnerships like us or others, but you definitely want to know a bit more about what's going on here, and you want someone here locally, whatever to sell or helping to promote your brands. And lastly, WeChat onboarding is really important, which is a super app. So it help you to do business communications and help you to build a community, and also to do culturally bonding as well. So I won't go. So that's actually a case study we did with WSET last year, I think, to promoting the education here in China, which is responding really well. If you're interested, I think I can give you a bit more information after this session. But yeah, that's everything for today, and hopefully you will get an understanding about how the digital landscape looks like in China. And if any questions, leave it in Q&A, and we can answer that later. So back to Lauren.
Thank you so much. Great. I even learned something new, quite a few things there, including that we spend on average 4.5 hours on our phones in China, which is a long, long time, given there's only 24 hours in the day. So I'm back to talk about e-commerce in China. Next slide, please. It'll go for about 10 to 12 minutes. And the areas that I'm going to be focusing on is firstly, a brief history of e-commerce in China, the sheer scale of e-commerce here, which accounts for around 50% of the e-commerce transaction globally. Social commerce, a relatively new trend, or not so new, really popular since COVID. E-commerce and wine, of course. And then finally, some key challenges that we see. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of the brief history, 3 key moments that I want to highlight. The first is when Taobao and JD.com first were established. That was back in 2003. It was around the time of another pandemic, which was SARS, and certainly accelerated online shopping. They were challenging eBay's dominance that was already here in China. From that period up until 2014, we saw mobile internet users continue to rapidly grow. In 2014, around that time, there was a formalised policy for what's called cross-border e-commerce introduced here by the government. And the real goal was to reduce red tape to ship small packages through these e-commerce channels. And it was supported by a range of policies, including free trade zones, bonded warehouses, which I'll talk more about. And Austrade were heavily involved in supporting Australian exporters around that period to take advantage or make the most rather of this new channel. The final is post-2020. Now, COVID not only accelerated online shopping here again, but also across the world. And we saw that live streaming commerce, say Douyin, which we heard a lot about just now, social commerce, things like Pinduoduo, group purchasing through social channels. This was driving a lot of the growth, around 50 to 100%, in fact, estimated of increased online transactions was attributed to here. So this is the new stage that we're in. Next slide, please. Now, the sheer scale of e-commerce here, it's around 3.6 trillion estimated to be worth by 2028. It continues to grow, growing at a rate of around 10% annually. Around 1 billion people have shopped online. They're looking for a raft of different products, including in premium products like Australian wine. And a major, on the right-hand side, you can see the key platforms here. The major platforms are Taobao and JD.com. They're accounting for around 2/3 of transactions. But don't discount these smaller ones. We say they've still got quite a large portion of the e-commerce market. Say Pinduoduo, Douyin, and Kuaishou. Kuaishou is a short video platform. Those, again, have really grown over the past couple of years. Next slide, please. Again, to illustrate the sheer scale and continued growth, consistently has grown at around $300 billion over the past couple of years, since 2019 onwards. And again, if there's a continued forecast growth of 10%, it's still a great sales channel to continue to invest into. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of fundamentals, I thought for some people on the call might know this, might not know this, might want a refresher. I'll go very quickly just in terms of the two e-commerce business models that are worth knowing. The first is general trade. What is it? You require a legal entity in China to import and pay for the goods. They clear the customs, taxes, and duties. These products can then be sold on all e-commerce platforms, not just the ones that are catering for cross-border e-commerce, and that accounts for around 95% of the transactions online. All brick and mortar stores. It does require product registration. Cross-border e-commerce is a really great way for products like, for example, skincare supplements, that their registration process is really quite cumbersome. The second is cross-border e-commerce. Here by 2024, this is will reach $53 billion worth of transactions. It's selling directly to consumers. You don't need to establish a company here in China. The product sits in bonded warehouses and then goes directly out to the consumers, to their door. That said, consumers have a limited amount of money that they can spend through cross-border e-commerce each year, and they are limited to the cross-border e-commerce channels in terms of the sales. So you don't have that entire breadth of other e-commerce platforms like Taobao. Now, we get asked this a lot. What does this mean for wine? Well, for wine, cross-border we see can be used as a market tester. It's more for smaller quantities rather than these major sales channels. It can also really be valuable for a channel for premium wines with limited supply. Next slide, please. So we have seen increased popularity of social commerce. Again, this was touched on quite a bit just earlier. What is it? Platforms are blending social interaction with shopping. It makes it really easy to discover and then to make your purchase. We're also seeing continuation of this in terms of the business environment, with Alibaba and Little Red Book actually signing a strategic partnership just last week. So an e-commerce platform, Alibaba, Little Red Book, who's really strong in social, coming together to partner. Community-driven commerce, again, this trusted economy is really critical for niche markets like premium wine, where authenticity matters. And so we're seeing that people will rely on KOLs, key opinion leaders, which are like influencers, or KOCs, key opinion consumers, which are like you and me, everyday users. And in fact, the kind of everyday users are seen as more reliable, more trustworthy. So in terms of live streaming, the psychology is really based on trust and perceived risk. Of course, other factors, but this is kind of the two quite important ones. They provide an interactive Q&A session, so it reduces that uncertainty. You can speak directly to the brand or the brand representative or the KOL who's representing the brand, as I said, and these limited time offers trigger this urgency. So one example that's quite good that I watched recently was ABC did a very short video on cherries, a cherry grower who was selling through live streaming this season in Australia. They sold 1,000 boxes within 1 hour. So go and have a look online on Google to have a look at that video, because I think it encapsulates really quite well how live streaming works. But that said, it's not so simple to do. Really, success, you need to blend entertainment. You need to have authenticity, adapting as well to these rapidly changing regulatory shifts, and also the operating guidelines of the platforms can be quite difficult to keep up with. So it needs to be executed with this cultural nuance and, of course, quick agility. Next slide, please. Now, wine and e-commerce, which is why we're here. So 53% of all alcohol purchases had shopped online, nearly double the rates seen in other markets. So e-commerce for alcohol purchase, it's just so convenient. People are finding good prices and they're able to, brands can engage directly. So there are over 1,700 SKUs added on Tmall Global, which is a cross-border e-commerce platform, in wine and spirits, mainly wines and whiskey from France, Australia and the UK between January and February 2025. These specialised platforms, which are also offering, say, wine subscriptions for you to taste and get more education about, but again, on the e-commerce side, annual alcohol drink sales increased 59% year on year between 2022 and 24. Wine sales rank second on Douyin. They account for around 10% of market share. Are growing. 82% is Baijiu sales, so rice wine sales. But again, the wine sales are going up on Douyin, so one to watch. The top 10 wine brands reported by Douyin, they're not famous, price at around 50 to 100 RMB, which is around 10 to 20 Australian dollars. Now, some of these newer trends, which are really quite interesting, and we're talking about relatively recent, that they've really started to blossom. So I want to highlight these, although it's in small text, but I think it's really important for you to note. The first is around the recent boom of rapid and instant retail, so such as Meituan. Meituan's like the Deliveroo, I guess, one of the Deliveroos here in China. And in fact, they have 60% of the market share. And I read recently that they peaked at 80 million daily orders, which is incredible. JD.com is also starting to deliver these through this rapid delivery. So within 30 minutes, Pupu and Ding Dong, which are these supermarkets, again, very, very convenient, delivered within 30 minutes. So it's really, really, really competitive here at the moment between the e-commerce platforms. Private domain channels, we already touched on before around the mini apps, WeChats. They're a business model where businesses, they can own their own private domain channels and sell directly to consumers. We're finding it's more popular as there's increased consumer engagement through this mechanism and reduced dependency on some of those big public e-commerce platforms. So we do have a pavilion coming up next financial year in the private domain for a private domain expo. We're calling for businesses who are already established in China that they can deliver smaller volumes to individual buyers. If you're interested, please feel free to get in touch with myself or one of the team. Next slide, please. So some of the key challenges, we say it's not all rosé. It is still, of course, can be very difficult. The first is around counterfeit goods. Fake products are continuing to be an issue. This has damaged consumer confidence and definitely has resulted in stricter regulations. Intense domestic competition. I mentioned earlier, each of the e-commerce platforms are really trying to capture that consumer money and that consumer spend by diversifying into other areas and even offering this 30 minutes chilled wine, which is very appealing. So hard for them to compete. The third is around dependency on domestic consumption. So we've got 1.4 billion or so, or maybe a bit less, given there's quite a few children who can't purchase on their own, but consumers using these platforms, so making it vulnerable to economic slowdowns, of course, and these shifting consumer spend. So trends rather. So we are seeing more businesses looking to export overseas, but of course under a very complex and difficult environment. So homogenous live streams, we're seeing some repetitive content, so really important for you to differentiate yourself while maintaining that authenticity, because we don't want people to get tired of the content perhaps that they're seeing online if you're looking to engage with them. And then finally, extremely high consumer expectation. Goods need to be delivered quickly. You need to be able to respond to, say, complaints or the need to return goods. So it's very, very high consumer expectations here in China. Next slide. So wanted to give a case study, haven't given the name, but to give you an idea of, what success looks like here in using e-commerce. So it's a premium white wine brand. They sold around 60 cartons of wine through one KOL within 1 week. Why it was successful? Well, we think they had chosen a KOL or influencer with expertise. They knew Australian wine. They worked with a KOL that also aligned with the brand. And so the brand's target audience were the people that were following their account, their KOL's account. They worked across platforms, so Little Red Book, Douyin, not just putting their eggs in one basket. And finally, it was a partnership. So the brand really worked with the importer to support promotion and sales. Next slide, please. Worth taking a photo of this. I'm sure we're going to send the presentation around as well to give you an idea of the e-commerce promotional calendar that comes up each year. It's important to factor these days in terms of your if you're providing promotional discounts, that's one way to do it, but also how you're making sure that you're building that brand loyalty and that customer loyalty directly. So you don't necessarily need to be looking just at price, but just ways that you can, promote your brand during these periods when people tend to be spending more. One that's coming up is 618. That's on the 18th of June. So watch that space. Think about the things that you can be doing that are going to resonate best with your target consumer. Next slide. And that's all from me. Thank you so much for the opportunity again to speak. And next up, we're going to be hearing about the upcoming activities from Wine Australia. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Lauren. I'm just going to spend the next 10 minutes talking about the upcoming marketing activities that Wine Australia are doing for the rest of this year across the mainland China market. So, aligned with the One Grape and Wine Sector Plan, we work as an organisation to engage global markets and improve international market access. Our ambition from a market development perspective is to increase the demand and premium paid for Australian wines to help build strong and sustainable market opportunities for Australian wine producers. We do this through elevating the image of Australian wine. In our market activities, for example, we have always on social media presence across both WeChat and Weibo, and we do PR and media engagement surrounding our events in market. And we also hold education seminars on an ongoing basis to increase the awareness and knowledge amongst both trade and consumers in the market. And I'll share a little bit more about our educational seminar program shortly. We also use events and tastings and masterclasses to drive consideration through activation and trial to really provide opportunity for people to try Australian wine, to learn more about it and engage with the wineries. and then also looking at opportunities to increase sales of Australian wine through promotions and local market collaborations. I won't go into detail on this because we have covered quite a lot of the China wine landscape already. But what I really wanted to just say here is, from a key takeaway perspective, whilst we have heard that the total wine market in China has declined over the last 5 years for some of those reasons mentioned throughout this presentation, there are still opportunities. You know, we know from Lauren's presentation that Australian wine is top from a value perspective in the market. We've regained our presence there. There is strong awareness, there is strong consumer sentiment, and familiarity and demand for Australian wine in the market. And so we really want to say that channel diversification is key to capitalising on the growth opportunities in the market. Australian wine in China, we know that the numbers from a headline perspective are looking really strong, up over that $1 billion mark again in the 12-month ended March 2025, with its high average FOB value. The value of shipments to mainland China exceeds that of the USA, UK and Canada combined, which is remarkable. And whilst red wine still dominates, as Lauren has spoken about, there are opportunities across the market for lighter, fresher, still white and sparkling opportunities. And so it's really about understanding how those opportunities align with your portfolio strategies. So from an activity perspective, I mentioned this briefly, but we have this year started collaboration with a network of experienced wine educators across mainland China. So we've appointed 13 educators across the country, and we're working across 20 cities, first, second and third tier cities, to really expand the awareness and knowledge of Australian wine. These educators will be working to educate hospitality, F&B, wine industry professionals, some consumers as well, and really providing them with more in-depth knowledge of Australian wine. As I said, it will cover more than 20 cities, so we're really looking to expand that presence of our activity beyond the first and second tier cities. And in addition, the educators will be leveraging the Australian Wine Discovered educational program collateral to really maintain a consistent and cohesive message about Australian wine, and really helping to, I guess, promote and empower the audience members to then share their knowledge and love of Australian wine further, and really hoping to disseminate that information about Australian wine across the market. We did do a call out earlier this year for submissions of wine that are available in market if you wanted to participate in this education series. There is a still opportunity to get involved. So our education seminars kicked off in April, but they will be running over the next 12-month period. And so if you would like to get involved in this program, the information is on our website, and I'll share that email address later, but it's just on the events page of the Wine Australia website. And so there's an opportunity throughout the entire year to submit wines that you would like to be considered for the event. We work with the educators and select those wines that are suited to the topics that we're covering at the time. And so we really want to get a great library of all of those Australian wines available in market that we can draw on as a resource to help promote the best of Australia. So the other one we're doing this year is the Australian Wine Roadshow. So we started this last year, obviously, in July time when the tariffs were removed in March. And this is the second year that we're running it. So this year it will be in the second half of September there, looking at the tier 1 and tier 2 cities that have been chosen based on the opportunity and the upcoming market opportunity for Australian wine. So this year we'll be going to Wuhan, Chongqing, Xiamen and Shenzhen. And there'll be 50 wineries and regions across Australia are going to be represented. The event includes both a free pour tasting and masterclasses, and we're working with Austrade to make sure that we get an engaged local audience of trade there. Austrade, for those people who are attending, for those wineries that are attending, there will also be an optional Australian wine tasting showcase being held in Macau at the end of the roadshow. And so the wines The registration for that was widely publicised at the beginning of the year. We are at capacity and registrations have closed. However, if you are interested in participating, you can go on a wait list. And again, I will share that information in a moment about how you can do that. But again, this really provides wineries with an opportunity to get in front of key trade and media in market, share their stories, get people to taste their wines, and given we're doing 4 different cities, it provides an opportunity to get a really nice coverage across mainland China. So we're also looking at doing Pro Wine Shanghai. So we went again last year in November, looking at doing it again this year. We had some really strong feedback that having the roadshow and then followed by Pro Wine was a great way to have a consistent presence in China for Australian wine and really put us in good stead in terms of investing in the market, you know, being seen to be present in the market and really caring about the mainland China market. So we are looking to continue that presence again this year. We are at expression of interest phase. So if you are interested and you haven't done so already, please head to our website to register your interest. There will be a minimum number of participants required to proceed. But I suspect, you know, we're getting really strong feedback so far. So I'm very hopeful and optimistic that we will be present and at Pro Wine Shanghai again this year. So if you do want to find out more about what's happening from an event perspective at Wine Australia, please do head to our website. So the What's Happening events section, you'll see all of the market activities and all of the opportunities available. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you sign up to our newsletters. We have 7 different newsletters that you can find out all the latest information from an Australian wine perspective. And if you have any questions about the activities happening across the Asia region, please also feel free to email the team at asia@wineaustralia.com. I'm now going to hand over to Dr. Naomi Verdonk to do a market regulation update.
Thank you, Bree. It's excellent to be here. As Bree said, my name's Naomi Verdonk and I'm the Market Access Manager at Wine Australia. The purpose of my section of today's webinar is to explain any of the recent regulatory changes in China that are impacting exports, Australian wine exports, and what Australian wine exporters need to do to remain compliant. Now, firstly, I will acknowledge that this is quite a technical topic, and although it may not be the most exciting subject, the content is critical to ensure that your wine enters China smoothly without delays or rejections. So, overall, today's session is going to provide practical, up-to-date insights to help you navigate the complex regulatory landscape that is China. Firstly, I'd like to introduce a document. It's called the China Export Market Guide, published by Wine Australia. Wine Australia maintains approximately 20 comprehensive export market guides, and these contain the key regulatory information to export to these markets. Now, the China Guide's available in both English and Mandarin, and it's one of Wine Australia's most accessed documents. Access is restricted to levy payers or exporters registered in WALIS. WALIS is the Wine Australia licensing and approval system. And it covers information such as the regulatory environment, that's things like duties and taxes, tariffs, as well as overarching wine and food laws, standards, which includes things like labelling, permitted ingredients, compositional criteria, and then certification and documentation, basically what's required when, as well as importing procedures and clearance protocols. So this guide is regularly updated when significant regulatory changes occur. But I also wanted to highlight the importance of contacting the export assistance team here at Wine Australia. They're here for support. So if there is something that isn't clear in the guide or you have specific questions, please feel free to reach out. The contact details are on the slide here. So we have exports at Wine Australia, and there's also a telephone number that's available as well. So most of my presentation will focus on general trade, but it's also important to touch on cross-border e-commerce, and this is to complement the presentation from Lauren earlier. So CBEC is basically where goods are treated as if they are personal items. So this means they're exempt from Chinese food and wine regulations. This includes things like labelling, product composition and standard compliance, as well as the pre-market registration to a degree. However, from January 2022, a global trade item number declaration is now required in the customs customs single window system of GAC. Now, I just want to draw your attention to the table. There's a comparison table on this slide. CBEC is obviously easier from a regulatory and tariff perspective. However, it is limited to online business to consumer transactions only. General trade is necessary if you want to sell business to business channels and supply supermarkets, restaurants, or other offline distributors. So the conclusion here is choose the model that aligns best with your business strategy, stage of development, and internal resources. And Lauren's presentation spoke to this in a lot more detail. So regarding general trade, there's a couple of registration processes that need to be adhered to before you can export. So the exporter registration, which comes from Decree 249, this has been in place since the 1st of January 2022, and it requires all overseas food exporters, including wineries and exporters who buy bottled or bulk wine, to register with Chinese customs. And this is the GACC or GAC. So registration must be completed online, and fundamentally, if there's no registration, there's no entry into China. So how do you register? You do this through the GACC Customs Single Window platform. And if you had a previous login before January 2022, you can log in using your old registration number, or if you're a new user, you can create a new profile. So I'd also like to draw your attention to something that Wine Australia has become aware of, that there are some fraudulent websites. So we do insist or recommend highly that you use the official GACC website link. And I've included this in the Export Market Guide, so there is easy access for all Australian exporters. I just want to also clarify that all of these types of registrations through the Chinese system, they are free, and no payment should be requested on behalf of third parties unless you're engaging a reputable agent. So please do watch out for any fake websites. So in addition to exporters, there's also a requirement that production facilities be registered with GACC, and this comes under Decree 248. This applies to both packaged and bulk wine, and we recommend registering both the facility where the wine is bottled or packaged, or in the case of bulk wine, the place where it's transferred to a bulk vessel. Things become a little bit trickier if you have contract packaging, but we ask exporters or production facilities to choose a site that best describes the production facility for the purposes of making the wine. Once again, registration is done via the GACC single window platform, and Wine Australia has provided a full walkthrough in the guide. This includes information like mandatory form fields, how to import Australian licence and registration numbers, submitting your category product details, and how to edit an existing registration. Now, this is important because after the registration process, you will be issued with a GACC registration number, and this number needs to appear on each bottle, on the outer cartons, or on the bulk shipping vessel, as well as any export documentation. So the number is issued by the Chinese authorities and is required on all the Australian products. So in recent times, from the 3rd of January 2025, there was an announcement and there's been a revised drafted Decree 248. There are a few key proposed changes, however, they're not in force at the moment, but I'll just walk through some of the simplifications that may occur in the future. They're expecting that there'll be some system recognition, so China may recognise foreign food safety systems that could be Australian, reducing the need for duplicate audits. They're going to be looking at new registration pathways, so a link between registration and national or regional systems recognition. A revised registration catalogue. Fewer products may need registration, but at this point it appears that wine production facilities will still be included and still be required to register. Re-registration simplification. That means that you'll only need to re-register if changes affect food safety. There'll be no time limit on renewal applications, and they've also extended the list of exemptions. So this may now include things like mailed goods, CBEC retail, carried goods, samples, which is important for the wine industry, gifts, donations, etc. So these reforms aim to simplify the system and clarify some of the grey areas, such as the status of samples and CBEC goods. So I will be watching this, and I will continue to provide updates as and when they become available. So I'd just like to provide some tips and traps when exporting your Australian wine to China. Some of the common reasons that wine gets rejected at customs includes unqualified labels, so this can be incorrect or misleading labels, the use of unapproved additives, or even failed lab testing. So I'll just outline a few things. So one of the first tips that we recommend is if you're a first-time exporter, do a trial shipment of a small volume to detect any issues during the customs clearance process. Now, you can register products well ahead of submitting a shipping application, and this is done through Wallace, but do allow some time to review. Notify Wine Australia at least 5 days before your export, because this could avoid delays in the long term. As I mentioned earlier, the GACC registration number must be printed on the wine packaging, but the exact format and placement is flexible. As you can see on the right of this slide, I've outlined all the mandatory and optional items as they currently stand for Chinese wine labelling. There are a few quirks in the Chinese system as well. Note that claims such as natural or contained sulfites are currently not permitted under the Chinese regulations, and also that organic labelling requires approval. There also can be some confusion around sugar labelling and the testing methods, so I encourage you to look at the guide for clarification. And on the 27th of March this year, so quite recently, it was also announced that Standard 7718 and the Administrative Measures for Supervision of Food Labelling, they're going to have some changes that may occur to the ingredient list, the date of manufacture, the minimum durability date, prohibited labelling, and also allergen declarations. Now, this is particularly important because at the moment, allergen declarations are only recommended, and they will be becoming mandatory from the 16th of March, 2027. Next, I'm going to look at additives and processing aids. So China operates under a very strict positive list of food additives. And this means that if an additive is not on the list, it cannot be used legally. Australia has a number of winemaking additives that are not permitted in China. For example, things like metatartaric acid, chitosan, yeast manoproteins, and collagen. And unfortunately, they're not permitted to be in wine exported to China. There's also been some recent updates. From the 8th of February 2025, Standard 2760 has changed, and there's a number of new approved or newly defined additives. Potassium polyaspartate has now been permitted for the use in grape wine to a maximum level of 0.3 grams per litre, and ascorbic acid is now defined at GMP for the use in grapevine. There are also some additives that have been removed. Lysosome is no longer permitted as a preservative for grape wine. Hydrogen peroxide and immobilized tannins are no longer permitted, but edible tannins are still permitted for clarification and decoloration. So I really once again emphasize that you need to review the composition of your wine before export to ensure compliance, and the Export Market Guide contains an up-to-date list of all the permitted additives and processing aids for China. Testing is also important. China's wine standards and testing methods may differ from Australia's, and for higher risk items, those that are approaching regulatory Chinese limits, We recommend that you use Chinese testing methods to avoid any discrepancies. Also, it's important that information is consistent, particularly on documentation. So ensure that a product name, origin, brand, batch number, address, ensure that this is consistent across all the documents. This includes a certificate of origin, online registration, shipping documentation, as well as the wine label. Everything must match. Also, you would obviously be aware that under Chapter, that's the China-Australia Free Trade Agreement, this provides zero tariff access to eligible Australian wines. To do this, you must export with a valid certificate of origin from an authorised body. Wine Australia is one of those. And if you do use Wine Australia's certificate of origin and use Wallace, please use the preview function to check the accuracy of information before submission and forwarding to your importer, because this can help avoid delays and ensures that the information is consistent. I also want to highlight that certificates of origin are valid for 12 months under Chapter. I'll touch on intellectual property because we strongly encourage protecting your brand before entering China. In Australia, trademark rights come with first to use, but as Lauren said, in China, first to register gets the rights, so prior use means little. Even if you've sold wine in China for years, another party can register your brand and stop you from using it. So a few tips are register in both English and Chinese versions of your brand, use a qualified trademark attorney, and if you can, avoid letting a third party, for example, a distributor, register on your behalf, and you need to make sure that it's registered in your name. There's some excellent resources on the IP Australia website, so I encourage everyone to visit this in first instance. Now, in terms of issues, there is a mechanism to report market access issues, and this is the Market Access Intel portal on the Wine Australia website. The purpose of this is to allow exporters to report barriers to trade and enter them in an anonymous way. However, adding contact information is helpful because it can assist with following up and leading to a resolution. So examples of issues to report include unexpected customs rejections, if there's any sort of new non-tariff measures that are interfering with trade, or if you're having reports of ambiguous labelling requirements. I'd also highlight that IP issues are not within Wine Australia's remit, so it is best to contact IP Australia. But all information that can be entered into this portal helps build a bigger picture of the challenges exporters face and can help Wine Australia help the Australian wine industry. So I'll just recap the importance of reviewing the China Export Market Guide. It should be the first step for all exporters to ensure regulatory compliance. For specific questions, especially around documents or technical standards, feel free to contact the Export Assistance Team. That can be done via email or on the telephone. I just invite everyone to follow up and, access the resources that are available on the Wine Australia website. I'll hand over to Bree for the Q&A.
Thank you, Naomi. Now, I know we've only got a couple of minutes left, so we'll try and answer some of these questions that have come through the Q&A. Lauren, there's a couple here for you if you're available. So the one around the retail channels for wine data that you had, do you have any data you can share on the price points and volume sold at the price points in these channels, in those retail channels?
Let me think. Well, like if we're considering specifically for white wine, for example, I know I talked about Sam's Club, as I mentioned, for one of the more popular, say, membership stores. So We're seeing in terms of their price points, it tends to be around 200 renminbi, where they're getting the most of their sales. And this is, again, specifically for white wine. Another major supermarket, say Metro, is around the 300 renminbi price point, around 50 Australian dollars. But actually, it is a good question. Like, I did go back to the team when we were preparing this PowerPoint and just saying, like, can we get some more details around this? And it was quite difficult to find. So I'm happy to take that question on notice and see if we can get more data points and share it across. But that's what I have at least here at hand.
Great, thank you. And just one more question for you, Lauren, while you're here. So you noted in one of the earlier presentations that the distributors are in a clearance mindset at the moment. Can you explain a bit more about that? And are they overstocked, or do they have too much Australian wine, or is the excess sitting with other countries' wines?
I think this is a general situation, and it's attributed, at least from the conversations again that we're having, attributed to having this holiday period over the past couple of months. So we had Chinese New Year, also had the May holidays more recently. It's been very nice because we've got quite a few holidays. But with that, through our understanding is these buyers had prepared for that, and that typically tends to be when people are giving gifts or they're doing business banquets, and the actual need or by the market was not what at the levels that they had expected. So I mentioned earlier, we're seeing around 2 to 3 months delays because of this need to move, the excess stock. And I think it's also important because it's 2 to 3 months. It's not to say that it's way overstocked or anything. Stocks are still moving. And again, specifically for Australian wines, there's that positive sentiment and that positive feeling to being able to move the wine by the buyers and by the distributors. So, that's the best way that I can answer that.
Great, thank you. And we've got one other question. Eric, are you still online?
Yes.
Great. We've just got a question, which I know Lauren did cover slightly in her presentation. I thought this one might be a good one for you to kind of weigh in on too. Yeah. So there's a question around collaboration with Chinese influencers and if this is an effective strategy for selling Australian wine, and is it a good time now to get involved?
Well, I think the answer, timing, is definitely yes, because it's a very well-developed KOL influencer markets here in China already, and it's multiple ways, either commission-based or packaging ways to sell or to promote. But I think it's really important to notice here is selling and branding is a different thing. Like firstly, choosing a right influencer to sell is important. Secondly, is they can help you to do the sales, but how you can maintain the relationship with the customers after they receiving the wine to build your brands, that's like really, really important. And it's like something you really need to think about that.
Great. Thank you so much. I know we have a couple of other questions in the chat, but we have run out of time. So we will respond to those questions offline, so we won't miss any, but yeah, I'm sorry, we're just running out of time on the webinar and I'm conscious of everyone's time, so we'll get back to you individually if we haven't already answered your question. So thank you very much to the presenters and to the audience for joining the webinar today. I think we've seen that the headline numbers are really positive and impressive, and there's great sentiment on ground for Australian wine in China. But it is important to keep an eye on what's happening on ground to make sure that you are aware of the changing market dynamics, and really important to align your portfolio and channel strategy to leverage these emerging market trends that we've heard about today. Utilise the resources from a Wine Australia and Austrade perspective to help build your knowledge and increase your market presence. And obviously reach out to us if you have any questions. Thank you again for your time. Good afternoon.